From somewhere in beautiful downtown Burbank, NBC once more tries to prevent...
What happens when two bass road warriors spend quality time talking music and life with one of their peers? Bassist, educator, author David C. Gross and bassist and head honcho of KnowYourBassPlayer.com, Tom Semioli, trade dates with the legends of rock, jazz, funk, blues, folk, country, and more. Notes from an Artist, revealing conversations with the legends who've created the soundtrack of our lives. What happens? You're about to find out. It's another episode of Notes from an Artist.
Tonight, right after Animal House, Eric Estrada and Howard Hessman meet the Dream Girls.
Hi.
Of Every Man's Fantasy.
I'll just knock you dead.
Morgan Fairchild, Linda Carter, Kathy Lee Crosby, Victoria Principal, and much, much more. They're the sexiest super ladies on the scene. They're the women who rate a 10 later tonight.
I did not have sexual relations with that woman.
All right, back to the matter of money. Lolly.
Paul Lynn, please.
Say, Paul, when is it a good idea to put your pantyhose in the microwave oven for about 2 minutes?
When your house is surrounded by the police.
Welcome to Notes from an Artist. I am your co-host, Tom Semioli. My co-host is David C. Gross. David, please greet our listener.
Baron, how are you today? Baron, how are you today? Baron, how are you today?
We welcome John Burlingame. We welcome John Burlingame. We welcome John Burlingame back to Notes from an Artist. John is an award-winning author, journalist, lecturer, educator, podcast host. We had John on the show earlier this year in 2024 to discuss Dreamsville, Henry Mancini, Peter Gunn, and music for TV noir, available now on Bear Manor Media. Now, David, as you recall, we had such a good time that we invited John back to discuss his previous two books, and he acquiesced. Those two books are Music for Primetime, which is on Oxford University Press. That came out in 2023, not so long ago. And an older book, TV's Biggest Hits, which was published in 1996 on Shermer Books. You can still get those books on Amazon and wherever books are sold. John is, in the words of Dr. Erwin Corey, the foremost authority. His knowledge and passion for the art form that is television music is unparalleled. We're not going to get too deep into it because we do that in the intro on the show. John takes us behind the scenes of some of television's most iconic shows, all of which you can watch now on YouTube. And he explains how the composers, producers, and even the actors work together, and how the songs came about, and how the music provided a subtext to enhance the scripts and even affect the emotions of the viewer, David. That would be you and me. You know, some of these songs, such as the theme to Miami Vice, which was a great success for Jan Hammer, plus the theme to MASH, All in the Family, Welcome Back, Kotter, Sanford and Son, actually became part of the popular music lexicon and bolstered the careers of their composers. They were hits on their own, and some were even covered by major artists, as you'll hear in our playlist. Joan Jett had a big hit with the theme from Mary Tyler Moore. So John is a great storyteller, and these are pop culture stories that need to be told. Don't you agree, David?
Yes. No, seriously. What I find fascinating about all of this is start with silent film. Then you have talkie. And obviously with talkies, you have music.
You are correct, sir. Yes!
So in the 30s, you had the Bugs Lee Berkeley musical. And after that, you had Gone with the Wind. And then after that, you had radio. And all of the music that was composed for radio, some of it in the early 50s was used for the early TV shows, which essentially mirrored radio. So it wasn't until Peter Gunn, which was around 1957, where music was technically composed for a TV show. And from that moment on, it's been the way it has. And one of the things I find really fascinating is more me than you, Tom, because I'm a little bit older. I got a chance to see all of television, pretty much. From the early kid shows to the early westerns, the original Mickey Mouse Club.
Who's the leader of the club that's made for you and me? M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E. Hey, they're high, they're ho, they're go, as welcome as can be. M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E. Mickey Mouse, Mickey Mouse, forever let us hold our banner high, 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 high. Come along and sing the song and join the jamboree. M-I-C-K-E-Y-M-O-U-S-E.
And then onward, as I say during the interview, once I went to college, TV was a dead deal for me because once you go to college and you start thinking a little bit more clearly, boom, what really wasteland do you want to deal with?
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I had the same experience. After I went to the University of Miami, I really never watched television again, so I missed all of the 80s and 90s and double zeros and current day. And that's one of the reasons why I really can't watch any of the late night TV. I don't enjoy it because I don't get the pop culture references.
That's very true. But I think also another reason why we didn't watch TV, we were gigging.
Right. We were working and we had our own lives, and I couldn't see the point of spending some of that life in front of a screen. Oddly enough, I worked in television for 20 years where I was in front of a screen. And as soon as I left television, I pulled the plug on my cable television, which I had to watch for work. Technically. But yeah, I don't know. It's just something about television. I miss the old TV, and we talk about that with John. Certainly, I'm a big fan, you are too, of Dick Cavett. We love Johnny Carson. Those old videos of the Johnny Carson and Jack Parr show were brilliant. We're both big fans of David Susskind. And even stuff like Mike Douglas and Merv Griffin with all the treacher, still had some gravitas to it. It wasn't just, crash commercialism. And, watching Kimmel and all the other talk shows, they're just promos for more garbage from Hollywood.
Exactly. Actually, we did not discuss this during the interview, but as you see the downfall of television, and truly, I know John says, well, there were some cutting edge things, All in the Family and things like that. But cutting edge, if you look at it now, how cutting edge was it? It was another ploy to sell product. And that was the whole point of television. It was
an advertising medium.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what's to say that there isn't a direct line to Facebook, to all of the use on the phone, is they couch Google as being something for research, but what is it? Every page, there's another piece of garbage advertising on it.
Yeah,
you go to YouTube. If you don't pay for the premium subscription, which I refuse to, I'm stuck with a minute or two of commercials.
I don't have to tell you things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street. There's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do, and there's no end to it. We know the air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. We sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we had 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy, so we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller, and all we say is, please, at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel-belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad. You've got to say, I'm a human being. God damn it. My life has value. I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore.
Call it what it is. It's minor contact with major advertising.
Right. It's advertising with interstitials of content. Now, of course, it's weird to discuss television because obviously in the 70s and 80s, we had cable TV. I never considered Netflix and HBO and Cinemax television. That really was when we use the word television, I'm thinking network television. You could make the argument that, well, HBO and Netflix, et cetera, and the cable channels are all a permutation of that. Now, that had cutting edge programming. Certainly HBO, the cable stations, they started off that way anyway because they wanted to provide an alternative for mainstream television. And then, of course, they became the mainstream. And, that's where we are now. And that's why you're seeing YouTube emerge as a content platform. And, of course, again, you're stuck with advertising. That is, if you get a premium. Now, a premium for YouTube now, which I pay, I think it's about $12 a month, but I'm sure in another 20 years, it'll be like cable TV, which is, way overpriced.
It's funny because I'm reminded of those old photos, those black and white photos where movie studios or movie theaters in the 50s had stop pay TV. They were already headed that way.
Right. They saw the writing on the wall. Well, it's interesting because the payoff for commercial television was you get it for free, right? The airwaves belong to the people. At least they did before the FCC was deregulated in the 90s. But the airwaves belong to the people, and the payoff was, okay, you have to watch commercials because that's what supports the medium. And for that, you got free content. Now you have to pay for the content. You have to pay through the nose for the content, and you have to watch commercials. So, right. And again, I refer to television as network television and cable television, not subscription, HBO, Cinemax, et cetera, et cetera. That's a whole other topic.
I find it really, really interesting that to watch old movies, you have to pay for it, which is kind of unique. And it really is telling that the entire industry, listen, are we saying these things because we're remembering our youth? And if you look at the films of Truffaut, Fellini, Lena Wertmuller, there was a lot of substance going on. And I just don't think Transformers and TV, or rather movies of that ilk, are anything more than a ploy to buy toys. So,
right. Yeah.
And then you look at what's on Netflix and what's on Prime Video. And now Prime Video's got a whole new thing where they're starting to charge for their movies, a few movies for the Minions that are free. If you're going to try and charge us for stuff, why not do something that has some content?
Exactly. You can almost look at it this way, that maybe the rise of social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter was a result of the failure of television. People wanted to go to another medium. Now, of course, television doesn't have the feedback that, it's a two-way medium, the social media. But I think one of the reasons those platforms rose, and especially YouTube, is it was an alternative to what network and cable TV became. If network and cable TV were still what they were supposed to be, if they lived up to their hype, people wouldn't go on social media. Why would you want to watch content on a computer screen?
Right. And there's another thing. We're getting close to New Year's. Why do you think that some of the cable channels play the entire Honeymooners? Why another channel plays every Twilight Zone? Gee, I wonder why. Could it be that this was actually good content?
Yeah, there was timeless content.
Something to think about?
John mentions that, obviously, he says one of the downfalls of the television generation was people read less, and that the producers and the script writers who wrote TV in the 50s and 60s grew up on books, on literature, and that the modern day screenwriter, producer, et cetera, grew up on television. And now you have a generation, it's 2024 now, that grew up on 00's television and tweens television. So, the medium constantly gets watered down. But you see, cable TV is on the verge of extinction. More and more people cutting the cord. So maybe the medium will reinvent itself at some point. It remains to be seen.
I think you're right to a certain extent, but I also think that with the myriad choices available today, it's just going to go down. Because instead of reinventing themselves, something new become a law.
Well, I think YouTube's done
this stuff
that.
is
I
over.
think YouTube's done that because it's a two-way platform. Not only can you watch content, you can create your own content. And I think we have a generation now that doesn't want to just sit passively in front of a TV set like all the previous generations. They want to get involved. I mean, one of the most fun things about watching videos on YouTube is to read the reader feedback. Now, of course, that's heavily censored, and a lot of it is now bot-driven. Right? If you watch a news program,
Right.
They'll say, you're the greatest journalist that ever lived. And, oh, thank goodness you were born, because we wouldn't get this information anywhere else. So the bots really need to tone it down a little bit and be a little more believable. But I think two-way communication, obviously, that's what's happening now. Right? Everybody, you can rebut the network news. It's funny, for every network news show, especially during the 2024 election, there were 10, 15, 20 countless websites poking fun at them and pointing out their errors and their misinformation and their bias. So, yeah, television news is sunk. And it's sad because television news was a real moneymaker for the networks because it didn't cost anything to produce, right? You just put people on a set and you turn them loose. But unfortunately, they got too steeped in certain ideologies. And as we see from this election, the country turned off the television.
Right.
You know, anyway, we digress.
Very well.
Let's do the plugs, David. You, the audience member, may be listening to David and myself every Monday night on Cygnus Internet Radio. Let me spell that for you. CYGNUS. Cue that up on the internet browser of your choice, www.cygnusradio.com. You, the audience member, may be listening to us on our Notes from an Artist podcast. I know that's what you do, David. Streaming right this very moment on Apple, Amazon, Buzzsprout, Spotify, and David's living room.
That's it.
Exactly. Subscribe to our YouTube
See all
page.
the wires in this room. I'm telling
Absolutely. If you're a glutton for punishment, watch us on YouTube, where you can enjoy behind-the-scenes video clips with our past guests, and you can type in insults to us on the response page. And be sure to log into www.Notes from an Artist, where you can look at touch-up pictures of David and myself, and you can keep up with whatever we're doing at the moment. Yes, we touch up actually his daughter touches up our pictures.
It's kind of like the book covers that used to have the fur around them. Remember kids'
Yeah.
books?
Actually, we're going to have fur on our website next year, so stay tuned for that. And be sure to log on to www.notesfromanartist.com, where you can keep up with whatever we're doing at any given moment. David, let's welcome our returning guest. He's back, David.
Oh, God.
That's too existential to start with.
Oh, goodness.
Just call me David Camus.
Do you want me to use headphones and a
No,
mic?
it doesn't matter.
Are we okay?
You're fine. As long as you can hear us, that's fine. This is radio. It's a podcast. You don't have to look at us. That's the whole point.
I just love radio.
Me too. As you can see, I'm a New York Metropolitans fan.
I'm a loser.
And I prefer listening to the Mets on the radio because they have their regular radio team on, as opposed to the networks, which have the network guys on who don't know the team, the nuances, and how to talk to New Yorkers. And it's such an experience. It's such a much more enriching experience. And it's really sad. Let's talk TV and sports. When we were growing up, David and I
won't grow up. I won't grow up. I don't want to go to school. I don't want to go to school.
Back when the earth was still cooling, when your team was in the World Series, well, the Mets weren't in as many as the Yankees. The local broadcasters also covered the game. So you had a choice to go to the networks with Curt Gowdy and people like that, or your regular guys. And I read YouTube on the game recaps. So many fans are upset. I miss my regular team broadcast.
But 300. Historical moment. That's it! Holy cow, what a way to end it. A strikeout gets his 300th career win, and I tell you, this is really an exciting moment.
The one that they built that relationship with over the years, whether it be TV or radios.
But I think there's something even bigger. Growing up in Manhattan, I was Yankees, Giants, Rangers. So I didn't even really care for basketball that much. I mean, it was interesting with Pearl to Pearl and Clyde. But truth be told, when we were growing up, you had your team every ball game. You didn't have to go to Amazon on Wednesdays. You didn't have to go to Apple on Fridays. I have an MLB account, part of T-Mobile. I get free MLB.com, but they block my game. Because if I'm in the New York area and the Yankees are playing at the stadium, they got to deal with Yes Network.
It's almost as if television is asking you not to watch.
I want the truth.
And there's a great YouTube channel. It's called 𝐉𝐨𝐧 Backdoor. And what 𝐉𝐨𝐧 has done, this genius, is he's taken a bunch of NFL games. He's a football guy from the 1970s, early 1970s, and he's run them through AI and restored them. So you watch the original broadcasts of just regular season games, no big Super Bowls and things, with the commercials, everything completely intact, but as if you were watching it there. And I love watching that television more than I do watching modern television because I'm not upset. I'm not bombarded with graphics. I'm not bombarded with all the commercial content and the sidebars and things.
You can't handle the truth.
How has that really changed television viewing? I mean, you have to have attention deficit disorder now to watch sports on television.
Yeah. And don't you find that TV people simply do not know when to shut up?
Will you shut up, man?
Listen. And let something play out. And whether, even if it's just the noise of the crowd, they've never fucking stopped talking.
I'll tell you, one of the greatest baseball broadcasts was when Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's record. Okay, now you remember all the networks, whenever Hank got up at bat, all the networks went to Hank Aaron, which was amazing, David, right? All the NBC, ABC, CBS, they all went to Hank. Hank got his at bat. When he hit the home run, I think it was, Vin Scully was calling it because they were playing the Dodgers. And Vin Scully, the ball is back. It's going, gone. Hank Aaron has just broken Babe Ruth's record, 715 home runs. You watch Hank run around the bases. You see him. He hugs his mother at the home plate. And Vin doesn't say a word. It's perfect. If that were today, oh, my God, you'll never forget where you were.
All right.
No, man, Vin it was like a painting. It was just perfect.
Yeah, he was a class act. Yeah.
Well, you're based in Los Angeles?
I'm in LA. I moved here in 86. I was in upstate New York until 86. Are you guys going to cut in TV themes, the music, while we talk?
Yes, we are.
Oh, great. Oh, fantastic.
Well, this is part of we're just obsessed with
not American TV. We're German and Swiss.
Hier sind $10 für Raiders-Karte und $10 vom berühmten Polen und $10 von dem entzückenden Gewinner. Hör mal, solltest du den Hauptgewinn ziehen, geben wir hinterher für dich eine Lynchparty. Mach dir mal keine Sorgen. Wie sehen wir denn aus? Na, so ungefähr 600.
But just talking sports, David, let us officially welcome Jon Burlingame back to Notes from an Artist. He just happens to wander in again. For those in our audience doesn't know who Jon is, he's an award-winning author. He's a journalist. He's a lecturer, David. Jon is an educator. He's a podcast host. He has been fighting a never-ending battle for truth, justice, and the American way. We first interrogated Jon on his latest book, Dreamsville, Henry Mancini, Peter Gunn, and Music for TV Noir, which you must buy right now on Bear Manor Media, correct?
Right.
Okay. Jon has been published in such media as Variety, Hollywood Reporter, and Premiere. And we enjoyed Dreamville so much that we dug into Jon's archives. His two previous books, Music for Primetime, there it is. See what that looks like, David? Yeah, which is out on Oxford University Press. And, of course, the previous one, TV's Biggest Hits, which came out in 96 on Shermer Book. And a lot of that material is
Isn't that the companion to Dolly Parton's Greatest Hits?
Yeah, I don't think so. But we encourage our audience to buy all three books so Jon can maintain his lavish lifestyle.
Yes, thank you, gentlemen.
When you're a writer around celebrities, I found when in my music journalism, musicians, artists would clam up around me. But did they talk freely around you where you were in your journalism days?
Well, yeah. The answer is yes.
Okay.
I think because when I started to write about this field, I was basically the only one doing it. And so they were, and because I think they knew I was a sympathetic audience, and it can be a complicated job. I think most of these guys, who I got to know mostly in the late 80s and early 90s, as I was preparing to write the first edition of that TV theme book, they were happy to talk to me. I think because they knew I loved what they did for a living. I was genuinely curious about how it all happened and how it all went down. So there are some people, admittedly, there's some composers who are careful about what they say in front of a journalist, especially if there's been tension on the show, or if there was maybe a less than happy experience with a producer, that kind of thing. But by and large, these guys were happy to talk to.
And it takes months to read your books.
What did you just say to me?
Because
don't tell people that.
Well, it does, because you put it down every 2 pages, and then you go to YouTube and you watch the shows, and then you get hooked on it.
It is true. When I wrote the first edition of the book in '96, which was called TV, as you point out, which was TV's biggest hits, I put an appendix in the back that said, here are the records to look for. Want to listen to X, Y, or Z? Correctly point out, today we've got YouTube. Virtually everything in my book, push a button and you'll find the themes on YouTube.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, the access we have to all these archives. But what struck David and I, when you look at the early history of television, music and television, it mirrors the early history of rock and roll. David and I, obviously, being musicians, and they did occur simultaneously, almost, in that it was a new medium and a new art form. And the creative alliances, or the business and marketing collectives, they didn't really know what they were doing. It was like they applied knowledge from other media that they came from, obviously radio, theater, and film, which you mentioned, and they tried to fit that square peg of the establishment into the round hole of television, which at the time was anti-establishment. That's why you had so much experimentation in the early days of television.
The 1950s in particular was, I don't know that I would use the word experimentation. I might say haphazard, accident prone is where I might go with that, because no one really knew what they were doing. And music, especially from the very beginning of television, was considered one of these, we better put some music on the show during the post-production period.
It's an afterthought.
Rarely did anybody think about it or give it any serious thought, or realize how important the theme for a show would become, particularly when, again, almost by accident, themes like Peter Gunn went to the top of the charts.
Right.
And then all of a sudden people realized, A, it was important, and B, you might be able to make a few shekels out of it. But that period of the 50s, to be honest, most TV shows in the 50s had forgettable themes, and many of them were actually out of production libraries, which meant that they were generic and actually weren't even written for the shows that they wound up being on.
That I found fascinating, the book. I had no idea that existed.
One of the things that I think growing up in the 50s is I had a ringside seat to TV as black and white was turning to color. And you're right, John, because if you think about it, as a kid, what's the first song you think about as a theme? It's the William Tell Overture, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And then you think in terms of the cartoons that were on TV, kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit.
Wabbit Twix. Kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit, kill the wabbit. Kill the wabbit?
Technically, it was classical music that really started, and you explained some of that in the first 100 pages of the book. And confidentially, for me, the first 100 pages are the best 100 pages of the book, and I'll tell you why. When I went to college, 1970, was the last time I watched TV. So, a friend of mine did the Barney Miller theme, so, obviously I had heard that. But really, for me, it was the 50s and the 60s. And I said this to Tom yesterday. The difference between the music industry is in the early 70s, by then, TV got it. It was no longer the fat, sloppy, cigar-chomping, tell you what we're going to do people. It was actually people who actually knew what they were doing.
In the new issue of TV Guide magazine, discover what's new in the second generation of video cassette recorders. Don't miss TV Guide.
That's
music
exactly
industry
right.
Did not. The music industry was still, oh gosh, we'll throw it up against the wall. But going back to the 50s, what I also found interesting, and I didn't really think about it this way before, was there were crime drama and crime drama. Crime drama. And all of a sudden, they put on the cavalry hats. But they were still crime dramas. It's just with a Western thing. And still, when I think about the two idioms at the same time, two songs that come to my mind are Lawman, the Barry Sullivan Show, The Rifleman as well in that genre.
Lawman, Lawman, the lawman came with the sun. There was was a job to be done, and so they sent for the badge and the gun of the lawman.
And of course, Mr. Lucky and Peter Gunn. Everybody stole from that completely.
That's right.
Other thing that I think I may have mentioned it the last time we spoke. 𝐉𝐨𝐧 was one of my sister's best friends, Vic's daughter.
Really?
So I had you grow up in Manhattan and you go to prep school, you end up with those kind of people.
And look how you turned out.
Let's get this straight now. I never fucked anybody over in my life. Didn't have it coming. You got that? All I have in this world is my balls and my word, and I don't break them for no one. You understand?
Tom and I were also talking about some of the things that happened in the 60s in TV, musically, that never happened again. For instance, the seeds on Mother-in-Law. Gino, Desi, and Billy being on the Lucille Ball show. They got that, we've got a whole new generation that don't think like the homogenized people that come out of World War II. We have to start catering to them. And so not only did you have rock-oriented themes, you had actual musicians. And I think what makes it so profound is why in God's name did they have the seeds on the mother-in-laws? I mean, that's crazy. That's really nuts.
Ladies and gentlemen, lovable backers, here they are, the warts.
Well, we're very anxious to hear you play.
Well, it's our pleasure, really. When Jerry told us what you're going to do for us, it really blew our minds.
Oh, that's too bad. Mom, that's good. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, you know, you people are really heavy.
Now, don't get personal. You didn't mean that kind of heavy. It kind of means he thinks you're great.
Oh. Yeah, you know, for putting up the bread.
Well, it was my homemade bread that made him heavy.
Bread means money. Oh, we seem to have a little trouble communicating.
Yeah. Do any of you guys speak Italian?
Oh, why don't you guys play something?
Okay, just give us a couple minutes and we'll get into our bag.
They sing in the bag?
Mom, no, that's just an expression. It means they're going to do their thing. They're going to play a number.
Oh. Okay, we're all set.
Good. Go ahead and jump into your bags.
Yeah, blow your brains out.
Yeah, they say there's a generation gap.
We like to do a number we plan to record. It's called Pushing Too Hard.
We hope you like it. We think it's gassy.
You're pushing too hard, or pushing on me. You're pushing too hard, or what you want it to be. You're pushing too hard about the things you say. You're pushing too hard every night and day. You're pushing too hard on me.
And then we have to get
episode.
into what in God's name were they thinking on Gilligan's Island? Didn't everyone get that they had electricity, that all these other people came to visit them, but they couldn't get off the island? What's going on here? What is the deal?
There's so much to unpack here, David.
Yeah, that's the point.
I don't even know where to begin to go with this. But let me start by jumping back to the William Tell Overture. which, believe me, when I was sitting there watching The Lone Ranger and Tonto, as I did in the late 50s and the early 60s, mostly in reruns for me. I was 7 in the year 1960, so a little young, but I didn't know from Rossini.
Right.
I thought it was, and to this day, most people think it's the Lone Ranger theme.
The Lone Ranger.
They don't realize that it's actually the opening of a Rossini opera from the 19th century. That's the power of this medium to sort of transform. And now, admittedly, that was also the theme for the Lone Ranger radio show. So much that happened in the early 50s in television was a kind of transfer from radio, as with Dragnet, which imported the radio Dragnet theme over to television. And so much of that was sort of either a direct transfer or a copycat of certain elements of what had worked on radio in the 40s. But it is true, and you talk about crime dramas and Westerns being sort of the predominant genres of the mid to late 50s and early 60s. And there's a lot of great music in there. I mean, when you think about the Westerns alone, apart from, you mentioned Lawman and the Rifleman, then think about Bonanza. Wagon Train. The Virginian, Rawhide.
Keep moving, moving, moving. Oh, they're disapproving. Keep them doggies moving.
All of these, which have such memorable themes, often, let's face it, when CBS launched Rawhide, they went to the guy who'd made a hit out of the theme for High Noon, Dmitri Tiomkin. And they said, give us something that will be good for a cattle drive. By the late 50s, things started to come together, I think, creatively. People began to slowly realize that there's value here, not just creatively, but also financially. There's value here in a solid theme that not only creates the sound world of the show, kind of oral signature for these shows, but also has potential to be a popular hit. Frankie Lane had a hit on Rawhide. Johnny Cash had a hit with Johnny Yuma Was a Rebel.
Away, 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 run the rebel Johnny Yuma.
Johnny Yuma was a rebel. He roamed through the West.
And of course, we talk about Henry Mancini having this theme for Peter Gunn that went to #1 for 12 weeks on the pop charts, and then wound up winning a Grammy for Record of the Year. So there's a lot that comes around here. The other thing I might say as a comment on your thoughts, David, is I've found that TV somewhat lagged behind trends in popular music. For example, when Mike Post came along, which is actually the early 70s, and Mike had been a guitar player on Sonny and Cher's I Got You, Babe.
Right. He did the Rockford theme, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and that's what happened when he partnered with Pete Carpenter and they launched the Rockford theme. You're hearing electric guitars and Moog synthesizers.
Yes.
It was a harmonica and a small orchestra. And it was Mike's contention, and he still maintains this today. He's still, by the way, Mike Post is still working in TV. He's doing the endless Law and Order franchise. Which,
oh, my goodness. Yeah.
And can you imagine how much money that's worth?
God. How many people have I met in television that guest starred on Law and Order?
Yeah. Anyway, so I remember Leonard Rosenman, the guy that wrote the themes for the Defenders and Combat, saying that when he came along to do television, he was kind of appalled because to him it all sounded like bebop from the 40s. Well, that was because that was because those guys who had sort of come into TV had been doing that. But Mike Post found that it was time for electric guitar. I think he used the phrase thundering guitars. It was time for a more modern sound. And Rockford is one of those shows now. And that's not until 1974.
Well, you were telling us in the book that Ironside was the first with a Moog synthesizer. But I want to stop for 1 second. But when you think of the names of all the westerns, it sounds like we're talking about gay bars. But I do digress. Rawhide. Come on, folks. What are we doing here?
What are we doing?
This is what happens.
This is a man who went to prep. This is David's prep school education. But, you mentioned Mike Post in the Rockford Files, and one of the things the synthesizers, but there was also a harmonic in the theme because the character was from the Midwest.
That's right.
And I went back and listened to that again because I used to watch the Rock. That's right. What a clever underlying thing. One of the things we learn about in the book, and again, I never thought about it. We were talking Gilligan's Island, that stories had to be told in the theme song, because how would you know if you came into the program 2-3 episodes in?
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. The mate was a mighty sailing man, the skipper brave and sure. 5 passengers set sail that day for a 3-hour tour.
And it's interesting that you tell the story of how the theme song actually sold the show Gilligan's Island. On the pilot, it was a calypso, which you can now hear on YouTube.
In tropical sea is a tropic port. Vacation fun is the favorite sport. This is the place where the tourists flock, renting the boats at the busy dock. 2 secretaries from USA sail on a Minnow this lovely day. A high school teacher is next aboard, all taking trips that they cannot afford. The next 2 people are millionaires. They got no worries, they got no cares. They climb aboard and they step inside with just enough bags for a 6-hour ride. Tourists come, tourists go, tourists touring to and fro. These 5 nice tourists, they take this trip, relaxing on deck on this little ship. The weather is clear and the sun is hot. The weather is clear? I think it is not. Tourists come, tourists go, tourists tossing to and fro. The captain is brave, he's... Caramba! What a storm! The captain is brave, he's a fearless man, and Gilligan helps him all that he can. The wheel she break and lose all control. SS Minnow do the rock and roll. The sea is now calm and the weather grand. Where is the Minnow upon the sand? What happened now will bring you a smile. The adventures of Gilligan and the skipper and the millionaire and Mrs. Millionaire and the other tourists on Gilligan's Isle.
And it was changed to a sea chanty. And they had to add the Professor and Marianne, I guess, second season. But it set the premise for the show.
Yes, and that's terribly important. It was really the Beverly Hillbillies in '62 that started the whole trend of let's tell the backstory. Let's tell our viewers who these people are, how they got where they are, and why they're there.
Come and listen to a story about a man named Jed. A poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubbling crude oil, that is black gold, Texas tea.
So then 2 years later, Gilligan's Island comes along. Sherwood Schwartz goes to the CBS people looking for money to greenlight a pilot. And the guy who's head of programming at CBS says, well, how are people going to know who these people are and how they got there? Sherwood says, we'll tell it in a song. I'll do it in 60 seconds. And if they had said no, we wouldn't have Gilligan today.
Now, let me ask you, I was, of course, I'm a couple of years younger than you, born in 1960. So I only saw the reruns of Gilligan's Island when I remember. Was there still the great controversy or the debate of Marianne versus Ginger? to young men?
That really didn't happen until rerun time.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
remember anybody talking about that while the show was on the air. But as soon as it went into reruns, it was Gilligan. You know, it was.
Oh, come on, it's Mrs. Howell.
Oh yeah. No, it's not. Well, the thing is that Dawn Wells got most of the fan mail. And I remember when I was a kid, and of course my parents' generation kind of considered TV like kind of junk culture,
right,
until it was something they liked, like Frank Sinatra or Wizard of Oz. But the dads always liked Ginger, and the young guys like Marianne. Yeah.
Hey, you know what else I want to come back to is something else David mentioned, the name Mizzy. Now, our listeners may not know what that refers to. The guy's name was Vic Mizzy, and he was the funniest composer I ever met. And he wrote the themes for the Addams Family and Green Acres.
They're creepy and they're kooky, mysterious and spooky. They're all together ooky, the Addams Family.
So far and wide, keep Manhattan, just give me that countryside.
For Those Two Alone has gone down in television history as two of the greats. But with Vic, he not only wrote the music and the lyrics for those shows, but he was in on the production early enough that he could talk the producers into what the main title sequences should actually look like. So when you see those Addams Family reruns and they're snapping their fingers to Vic's theme, or when you're watching the opening of Green Acres and they're singing along, and then exactly they're the pitchfork at the end. That's because Vic was on the set coaching the actors during the main title sequences. I mean, nobody does that today. It's extraordinary.
Wow. And so we don't have any characters like Gomez Addams anymore.
Tish, you spoke French.
No, I loved him.
But John Austin, always the salacious.
French.
Querida mia.
But I want to go back to the 50s again, because I really love that particular period. There are two other genres on TV that were very, very important. One were the game shows. The other was variety shows. Isn't it interesting, as we import from radio, the Captain Spaulding theme for You Bet Your Life?
That's right. That's right. And I think that's probably because that was so associated with Groucho. And so it seemed like, I think, probably an obvious choice. That's probably the first great game show we remember from the 50s was You Bet Your Life. Yeah.
Say the secret word and divide an extra $100. It's a common word, something you see every day.
Of course, the variety shows, you had Milton Berle, you had Ed Sullivan was in the 50s.
That's right. And these guys were live. People forget that these shows were live every week. I remember talking to Jerry Goldsmith, who was around during that period. He was one of the great composers of both TV and film history. And he remembered when the shift from live to tape came along. He said there was nothing more exciting than being there live when you were conducting your music and you knew people all over the country were listening to it at that moment. He said when they went to tape, everybody's energy level dropped by 50%.
We know that from the music business.
Yeah.
Now, you guys, you children of the 50s here, John, you grew up in the 50s. How do you think that television shaped your generation in a way that was different from your parents and your grandparents? This new technology that came into your living room.
I think it's kind of extraordinary, the differences. And I don't know that it was, I hate to say this because I've made my living in this for many years. I don't know that it was necessarily a good thing. I think to myself today that there's a couple of generations now that don't read nearly as much as they used to because they're so visually oriented.
Yeah.
So much is about movies and television and whatever they can watch. Of course, now it's, YouTube or TikTok or whatever the current thing is. I just don't think there's enough reading today, enough quiet contemplation, which I think was valued more in an earlier generation, an earlier era. But then on the other hand, I'm super glad I grew up in the period that I did because there's an extraordinary amount of great music. And from in my world, for television, and of course for movies as well, with great new composers, many of them coming from TV and then graduating to film, like John Williams and Jerry Goldsmith and Lalo Schifrin, example. And so I have to say, as a kid who grew up loving television, this music is the soundtrack to my life. And I remember so many things. And writing the book was maybe one of the most pure joys I've ever had. Because I was able to sort of indulge my nostalgia for old stuff and interview. The new book, the new version, Music for Prime Time, is the product of 35 years of research. And over 400 interviews with composers that I did personally. And I'm very proud of it because I think I was able to sort of track an entire history of music for the small screen.
So many different people we learn about, like Charles Fox, who to me is like the Elton John of TV themes. What he wrote fit perfectly what was happening in the singer-songwriter movement. You think of his Happy Days. And show I watched as a teenager, and he didn't want to make it a 50s retro sound, so he did 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock rock Bill Haley. He did Mondays, Tuesdays, Happy Days. So he co-opted that.
Sunday, Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy days. Thursday, Friday, happy days. The weekend comes, my cycle hums, ready to race to you. These days are ours.
Exciting and new. Come aboard. We're expecting you and love.
This really fit in with the singer-songwriter movement.
And you missed my favorite of all of them.
What's that?
The theme for Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman.
All the world is waiting for you and the power you possess. In your satin tights, fighting for your rights and the old red, white, and blue. Wonder Woman.
Wonder Woman fighting for her rights in her satin tights, I believe, was one of the lines from that.
Now
you got David's attention.
That could be anyone in a band.
I love the story of Sonny Curtis. Sonny Curtis, who did the Mary Tyler Moore theme.
Who can turn the world on with her smile? Who can take a nothing day and suddenly make it all seem worthwhile? Well, it's you, girl, and you should know it. With each glance and every little movement you show.
There is a statue in Minneapolis of Mary tossing her hat in Minneapolis, and that has to do with the song. And this guy, Sonny Curtis, wrote for, he played with Buddy Holly. He wrote the Bobby Fuller classic, I Fought the Law, which David, since I'm a few years younger, I remember the Clash version. But here's an interesting sidebar story. Fascinating, he tells you that he never saw the pilot. And the song worked because he didn't have that much information. He just had the bare facts. The girl was jilted by her lover. She's from a small town in the Midwest, and she comes to the big city to make it. And there's a great little coda on the piano riff now after the song on the show, the theme song. Now, Joan Jett in the 90s made that into a hit. Love Is All Around, I guess it was. And she goes on Letterman to perform with the Paul Schaefer, the world's most dangerous band. They play the tune, and as soon as they hit at the very last note, Paul plays the coda that was on the TV show that wasn't on Joan's record.
Turn the world on with a smile. We can take a nothing day, suddenly make it all seem worthwhile. It's you, girl, and you should know it. These plans are never little movement, we show it. Love is all around. Don't need to waste it. You can have the time. Why don't you take it? You're gonna make it after all. How will you make it on your own? This world is awfully big. Girl, this time you're all alone. It's time you started living. It's time you let someone else do together. Love is all around. No need to waste it. You can have the time. Why don't you take it? You're gonna make it after all. You're gonna make it after all. You're the one most likely to succeed. Just be sure to keep your head, so you know that's all you need. Everyone around adores you. Don't give up, the world is waiting for you. Love is all around. No need to waste it. You can have the time. Why don't you take it? You're gonna make it after all. You can turn the world on with a smile. You can suddenly make it all seem worthwhile. It's you, girl, and you should know it. With each glance and every little movement, you show it. Love is all around. No need to waste it. You can have the time. Why don't you take it? You're gonna make it after all. You're gonna make it after all.
Again, another, right, you can't separate the music, the theme song, from Mary Tyler Moore.
You know, it's absolutely true. It's one of the things, you know, I often think about the theme for Friends, which came along in 94. And the question then becomes, would that theme have been a hit if the show itself hadn't also been an instant hit with you?
Interesting. Yeah.
Sometimes it is the combination of the visuals and the music, which you remember. And sometimes it is the repetition of a tune you're hearing week after week for a show you happen to love that also plays into your adoration, if you will, of a new piece of music. It is a good theme. The show was popular, and it went on for 10 years, maybe more, I don't know. And so it is now considered an absolute classic.
Job's a joke, you broke. Your love life's the away. It's like you're always stuck in second gear. When it hasn't been your day, your week, your month, or even your year. But I'll be there for you. When the rain starts to fall, I'll be there for you. Like a big man, I'll be there for you. 'Cause you're there for me too. Still in bed at 10 and work again at 8. You burned your breakfast so far, things are going
what are the 5 best hit themes of flop shows?
Has there ever been a hit theme from a flop show? I don't think so. I could be wrong about that. I don't think so. But I can tell you there have been a lot of great themes written for shows that didn't last. When I was writing the first book, I didn't have access to everything that, of course, we now have access to. So when I wrote that first book edition in 1996, I didn't know about Karen, which was the theme that the Beach Boys sang in the fall of 1964, when that show was part of Nighty Bristol Court, Monday nights on NBC. And the Beach Boys, and luckily you can now see it on YouTube. And it's fascinating to me that the Beach Boys didn't write it. They had a guy, Jack Marshall, who was a regular composer at Universal at the time, wrote the tune, but they brought in the Beach Boys to sing it. That's actually the first instance of a rock and roll group actually doing a TV thing.
She's a doll, she's a queen, she's a tantalizing teen, and Karen is her name. They call her Karen. At a party, she's a stomper and a rock and rollin' romper. Everybody's glad she came. Hey, that's Karen! She sets her hair with great precision, is a favorite indoor sport, and by the light of television, she can even write a book report. There is no one greater north or south of the equator. Karen's always in a whirl. She's alarming but disarming and a really very charming modern girl.
Wow. And so that's one example of, and by the way, it's a great theme. You should check it out. I'm a huge fan of Dave Brubeck's theme and scores for Mr. Broadway, coincidentally also in 1964. One of the huge disasters of CBS's fall lineup that year. Craig Stevens was in it. It was about a press agent on Broadway. Nobody liked this show. It was gone in 13 weeks. But Dave Brubeck came in and wrote a ton of great New York jazz for that.
Let's just take, you had Love on a Rooftop.
Oh, yeah.
Marlo Thomas. Partridge Family. What's along with the 2 families? The Brady Bunch.
Brady Bunch, yeah, sure.
You had imitation families like Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best. I mean, really, who can honestly say they did not have a dysfunctional family? I find the mind-numbingness of TV and basically Prozac for your eyes. Truthfully. I mean, really, when you really get down to it, oh, sure, there were the good shows. There was Patty Chayefsky. There's this, that, and the other thing. But come on. It really was to anesthetize.
Well, and to come back to our earlier point, or our earlier discussion, I guess I should say, this is one of the things that caused FCC Chairman Newton Minow to declare television was a vast wasteland in the 1960s.
Right.
I can remember people in the business were sort of outraged. How dare you? But in fact, there was a lot of crap on TV in that era.
You think about it, John, would you say that the Kennedy assassination, TV died as well? Because after that, it was, we had to be happy. We had to be happy. Mm-hmm. Vietnam War, 2 more assassinations. Yeah. It was almost, this was Soma, as Aldous Huxley would.
So here's what happened, I think, in the aftermath of the tragedies of the 60s. What you had was basically 2 schools of thought in network television. One was, yes, we need more escapism because we need to somehow make us happy, even though we're all miserable. And the other element was people who made dramas, particularly in the late 1960s, went harder toward more substantial issues and tackling things. I can remember a Dr. Kildare, where they took on the funeral home business for basically scamming people out of thousands of dollars. And I can remember in the early 1970s, I guess, this might have been 1970, the show that Hal Holbrook starred in, which was called The Senator, which actually literally dealt every week, well, for the half a season that it was on, before NBC canceled it, with serious, important issues either happening, on the college campuses or, corruption in our state capitals or, So there was an element of television that wanted to take what we were going through and comment on it in terms of the name of the game in starting in 1968, which had a great Dave Grusin theme. Dave Grusin, by the way, is now 90 years old and is still on the road playing keyboards.
Old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you were.
That show did a lot of week-to-week sort of interesting takes on what was happening in society. So, it went into two different directions, really. It wasn't all stupidity in the sitcom.
But look what happened after COVID. It's all dystopian.
It's
really dark.
Well, getting back to see TV with substance, and I was old enough to remember, this is when All in the Family started. I love the story we'd learn about Those Were the Days, Charles Strauss and Lee Adams, and, Boy, the Way Glenn Miller played, right? Songs that made the hit parade. And Strauss tells you the story where they used to gather around the piano in the house, because that's what people did in the 40s and 50s. And that was the visual intro. And that Strauss actually plays the piano off camera while Gene Stapleton and Carol O'Connor sing. And of course, they had a studio guy in there. And that song became a hit.
Boy, the way Glenn Miller played.
Songs that made the hit parade.
Guys like us, we had it made. Those were the days.
And you knew where you were then.
Girls were girls and men were men. Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. Didn't need no welfare state.
Everybody pulled his weight.
G.R.O. LaSalle ran great. Those were the days.
And that period of time with all those Norman Lear shows that starts with All in the Family, they were really sharp about who they hired. I mean, that in the next few years, you had Alan and Marilyn Bergman and Dave Grusin doing the theme for Maude and Good Time.
Lady Godiva was a Freedom Rider, Dave.
There you go. I mean, I don't even know if you can get that today. That was so cool in its time. But they hired Quincy Jones to do Sanford and Son.
Let me tell you about just one. Yeah, well, I got a Sanford and Son story that's interesting. And again, that appealed to our generation, that Sanford and Son was a funky tune. It was a great hit song on its own. One of the top session bass players is a guy by the name of Chuck Rainer. I don't know if you're familiar with the name Chuck Rainer. He's done Aretha Franklin, Steely Dan, Ray Charles. He was doing a recent interview, and they asked him if there's any regrets, in your career as a studio musician where you made a mistake or when they left it on the record. And he goes, yes, it's the theme to Sanford and Son. And he hit the wrong note on the very last downbeat at the end of the song. Quincy Jones, who was a friend of Red Fox, left it in, but because the show was a comedy and it had an awkward ending, he left that in there. And of course, Chuck Rainey, when he leads his own bands, they all want to hear the Sanford and Son theme, and it aggravates him to no end that he has to play the mistake at the end of it. But
that's a great story.
Yeah, it's fabulous. Bob James did Taxi. We're talking about jazz artists. He originally wrote, as you say in the book, an up-tempo song thinking it was about New York City and taxis. And the song was retitled Touchdown, which was one of his hit records. It's interesting that they went for the more atmospheric track, which you allude to, because the characters in the show were very reflective on their lives. Remember, being a cab, you didn't set out in life to be a cab driver. When you lost your job or you needed money, you had nothing to turn to, so you became a cab driver. And it's almost the same with the MASH theme, which was a very politically charged program, because it was more about contemplating what they were doing in the war.
Well, think about what the title song is really.
Yeah, Suicide is Painless. Yeah.
Where did that come from?
A couple of quick points about that. The Bob James interview, which is in the new edition, Music Prime Time. I didn't get to Bob for the first edition in '96, regretted it. And then when I did get to Bob, I don't know, a few years ago, he could not have been nicer. God, we spent half an hour talking about how he did this and how, and he had such a great time that he never came back to TV again because he figured he'd never had as good a time as he did on Taxi. And the other show,
he did Libraries as well, though. That's you mentioned that in the book.
That's how he did Taxi. Was he did at the beginning of a year and basically supply them with an album's worth of stuff, which they would then track in when they found something that they liked for a specific episode. Now, with regard to Suicide is Painless, that's because the theme from MASH, the television show, was actually ported over from the song that was written for the MASH movie in 1970.
Okay.
So if you see that, Suicide is Painless was the song. And by the way, Johnny Mandel is the composer there, but the guy who wrote the lyrics was actually Bob Altman's 15-year-old son. And Altman calls in Mandel during the shooting of the movie, and he says, listen, my kid's written this thing, and I wonder if you can just, put it to music, and we'll put that against the Last Supper takeoff that we have, and so Mandel did what he had to do. Then the movie becomes a hit. They make it into a TV series, and then Johnny comes back to Fox to do a 1-minute version of his theme, and he does this very gentle sort of guitar-based main title, which plays against the helicopters and the craziness and everything that's going on visually. Just another sort of brilliant moment.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And again, being a child of the 70s, another one of the themes that you write about is Welcome Back, Kotter. And it's kind of interesting how that fits so perfectly with Kotter, because Kotter was a product of the 60s. And here he was coming back to his high school to teach. And John Sebastian was a product of the 60s, and he's making his
Very
career
much.
come back. And these guys are still young. They're in their mid-30s. They weren't old guys. And that song had a lot to, they still had a lot to offer to make contributions. And you see that in both characters. And of course, fascinating story how he actually changed the name of the show to Welcome Back, because the only thing that rhymes with Cotter, David, is otter.
Welcome back. Your dreams were your ticket out. Welcome back to that same old place that you laughed about. Well, the names have all changed since you hung around, but those dreams have remained and they've turned around. Who'd have thought they'd lead ya? Who'd have thought they'd lead ya? Back here where we need ya. We got him on the spot. Welcome back. 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 We always could spot a friend. Welcome back. And I smile when I think how it must have been. And I know what a scene you were learning in. Was there something that made you come back again? And what could ever lead you? What could ever lead you? Back here where we need you. Back here where we need you. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Was there something that made you come back again? And what could ever lead you? What could ever lead you? Back here where we need you. Back here where we need you. Yeah, we tease him a lot, 'cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yeah, we tease him a lot. Welcome back. Welcome back. 'Cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. Welcome back. Yeah, we tease him a lot. 'Cause we got him on the spot. Welcome back. 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 Welcome back.
John Sebastian.
It's true. And Sebastian was very candid and funny about that.
Yeah.
And I should say that a lot of this has to do with who's doing the hiring and why they're choosing the people they choose. In this case, the producer of Welcome Back, Kotter, was a guy named Jimmy Comack, who had earlier done The Courtship of Eddie's Father and was smart enough to hire Harry Nilsson to write that.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Right. The great,
And then next did Chico and the Man and Jose Feliciano to do that theme.
People, let me tell you about my best friend. He's a warm-hearted person who loved me till the end. People, let me tell you about my best friend. He's a one-boy, cuddly toy, my up, my down, my pride and joy. People, let me tell you about him. He's so much fun. Whether we're talking man to man or whether we're talking sun to sun, 'cause he's my best friend. Yeah, he's my best friend. La la, ba da 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 ya, ba da 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 ba da 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 ya. Oh,
One, two, 1, 2, 3, and.
Don't be discouraged.
so hard to understand. Chico, if you try now, I know that you can lend a helping hand, because it's good in everyone, and a new day has begun. You can see the morning sun if you try. And I know things will be better. Oh yes, they will for Chico and the man. Yes, they will for Chico and the man.
And then he comes back and hires John Sebastian of the Lovin' Spoonful for Cotter. I mean, this was a kind of a guy who was in touch with popular music in ways that most producers were not.
Exactly. And really, I mentioned,
We spoke about this yesterday, how these shows, I guess they were good. I didn't want, for most of the part, everything was on film until the dreaded live audience and everything became video. And if you think about it, they look cheap. They really do compared to film.
Well, yes and no. Some stuff looked cheap because it actually was cheap. There were some shows that were actually shot on 16 millimeter, and they all looked terrible on television, particularly some of the British shows that came over here in the late 60s or early 70s. Most of the stuff that was shot on 35 looked pretty good. And you also have to remember, in our era, I have vivid memories of my dad being on the roof, moving the antenna in certain directions.
Yes.
So that the snowy picture we were getting on our 80s affiliate would sort of go away, and it would look at least a little bit better, so that I could watch Batman in 1965.
What a great
Another
theme.
hit song.
What a great theme. What a great theme, Batman. In the 70s, well, no, actually, I guess it was 1980 or thereabouts, Miami Vice, Jan Hammer. Now, all of a sudden, you had the self-contained composer who could play it all himself. And as we see throughout television, just like any other art form, everybody wants to do it on the cheap. That's why and the fascinating is you detail in the book that a lot of these music libraries were recorded in Mexico or Europe, so they wouldn't have to pay musicians. And of course, the musicians union was always in a kerfuffle because they felt that television was going to take away from the
live performance,
which is what they were afraid of with record albums. But Jan Hammer in that era really kind of changed the game now, because now with synthesizers and technology, as we see in popular music, now it can all be programmed by one guy. So you don't have to have a studio full of musicians on union scale.
Yeah, that's right. It was Michael Mann's idea to bring in Jan Hammer for Miami Vice, and Michael Mann had been a filmmaker, and he was kind of edgy in terms of his approach to certain things.
Sure.
And he wanted to, and not only, I should point out, not only did he hire Jan Hammer, who did the whole thing in his studio, the entire underscore, but he also had the rather bold idea to incorporate current pop and rock songs throughout the narrative on those shows. So I'm sure you'll remember that sometimes there would be 4 or 5 pop songs in an episode of Miami Vice.
Right.
And it really changed television to a degree that still exists today. The music supervisor. There was no such thing as a music supervisor back in 1984. Now, music supervisors rule the roost and are huge powers in how every television series sounds and how often you hear songs.
Right. And of course, if it was NBC and let's say the artist was on Universal, well, they were going to get first crack because NBC Universal wanted to promote its own artist. So that's who got the soundtracks on the song. So
a lot of things changed in the 80s. I was happy to see the Star Trek shows, which began not the original from the 60s, but rather the 80s remakes of Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, all those, routinely had 35 or 40 piece orchestras playing those scores every week. And it really gave a kind of scope to those shows that it wouldn't have had if it was one guy in his garage with a synthesizer. But as you correctly note, money is a big deal. And if a producer who maybe didn't have the best ears said, well, geez, if we can get one guy to do it, why should we be paying 35?
Right.
And
It's
that's why there was so
it's
many
called the
electronic-
television business. That's what
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
But
Yeah.
but talking about today's television business, I mean, think about the massive amounts of channels and the lack of any quality with it. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm really down on television. So if I'm seeming a bit
curmudgeonly,
yeah, it's true.
I learned
It's
that
true.
on watching Gunsmoke.
or drinking Gunsmoke. No, but seriously, think about it. You have the reality TV that's still going on to a certain extent. Again, so you could be on the cheap.
Yep.
My wife created a number of reality-oriented TV shows. I don't know if anyone knows this, but the first year of a reality show, you get basically no money whatsoever. All of the people who participate don't make money. Actually, my son's wife, she and her sister were in the TV show Twinning, the game show. Unless you hit, you're making crap. So another way to basically lose out on having to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, it is true. I've always deplored the reality genre, and in fact, I didn't really want to deal with it at all because so much of that stuff, I can't stand to watch it to begin with. And much of the music that's in those shows is production music, it's library music. On a show like Survivor, which I do talk a little bit about in the book, they've actually spent, I guess, again, because it's been a hit now for several years, they actually do spend serious money getting a new sort of library of sounds for every year, depending on where in the world they are, that sort of thing. So it's a cut above most of what goes on in reality television. But no, I'm not a big fan of that genre. I will say, however, David, now that we're in the streaming era, and there are so many shows that are streaming shows, there's more money being spent on music than there had been back in the network days of the 90s and the early 2000s. So, and I also think that because filmmakers, that is movie makers, are coming in and doing television, they, number one, not only want bigger budgets, but they're more open to a more sophisticated use of music than we used to get on most TV shows. So when you get, Jeff Beal doing A House of Cards, or Ramin Djawadi doing Game of Thrones, or somebody like Nicholas Britell doing Succession, these are sharp guys who can create music that will last and that will accompany an often high budget show with something to say, or that speaks directly to today's audiences. So I'm happy about that trend, at least.
One of the programs that resonates with baby boomers, people our generation, is Curb Your Enthusiasm. And because what I noticed after reading this book, I thought, wow, it echoes early television in that you have old TV bridge music, right? First of all, you have the funny tuba theme. That is the theme, and and there's bridge whenever a new scene comes in. You have the bridge, and which quotes the original theme, and of course it's not woke humor, and certainly Larry David resonates with our generation. But what about the effect of the technological advances? There was certainly a difference between watching a movie in the theater and watching television in your dorm room, right, on your little Sony portable. In the double zeros, everybody had entertainment center and things. So now it's like you were bringing the cinema in. It seems to me like Game of Thrones. My late wife used to love that show, but to me, it wasn't television. It was like watching a film. They were like mini films. So, and it seems to be there is a blurring of the lines between what is television and what is film. Now, Curb Your Enthusiasm, why we liked it, because we enjoyed Larry David, was it was just like watching, Father Knows Best.
Jane, you ignorant slut.
With a slightly different spin.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I don't understand that one at all, Tom. But
well, Larry didn't know best, but Game of Thrones and those type of
kind of
shows.
like In Cold Blood reminds me of Partridge Family.
Exactly. What a great song. I another thing I noticed you didn't mention the Monkees or shows like that. Well, you did in the passing. You mentioned the theme song. Hey, with the Monkees.
That's right. That's right. And here's an interesting angle on the Monkees, which, by the way, I did watch and did like in the 90s.
I was of that generation.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I sort of love about the Monkees is that the guy who wrote the underscore, which gets almost no attention whatsoever, was a guy from the record business named Stu Phillips.
Okay.
Who, by the way, is still with us in his 90s. He would, a few years later, hook up with a producer named Glenn Larson. And Glenn Larson did things like Quincy and Switch. And my personal favorite, Stu Phillips's great moment, was Battlestar Galactica in 1978, which people widely perceived as a Star Wars ripoff. And in fact, they did sue over the closeness to the Star Wars. But it didn't matter. Stu Phillips wrote his ass off and wrote this grand scale, big orchestral score that was played by the LA Philharmonic, which was not used to doing TV music. And it really worked for that show. And so to imagine that this guy who was doing sort of Tinker Toy music during the Monkees could 10 years later write one of the great orchestral scores of the 70s, it still boggles the mind.
It's
I
great
think when you think the Monkees, though, it's a 30-minute commercial for their songs. That's really all it was.
And
Bob
it was,
Ray
I think, and
was great.
and controversial then because, oh, well, they didn't write all their own songs and they didn't play their own instruments and all that sort of thing. When in fact, boy, a lot of those songs were big hits and people loved them and are now very nostalgic for them.
Well, it's kind of interesting. I've met Mickey Dolenz a few times and we talked about this. Really, BBC tried to pass them off as something they weren't, because the records should have been soundtrack to the TV, The Monkees show, The Monkees. But it didn't say that. It said The Monkees, just like it was a Beatles or a Rolling Stones album.
Right.
And things like that. But what I always appreciate the Monkees watching them in my adult life was that they put in jokes for grown-up. So because you only had one TV set in the house.
That's right.
Mom and dad, okay, the kids want to watch the Monkees, let's put the Monkees on for them. But they were, you had, of course, established Hollywood character actors all throughout it. Frank Gorsh and all these people were in there. And so the grown-ups got it.
And I would still rather watch the Monkees than the Partridge Family.
Yeah.
I don't know that you would even call any of that humor edgy particularly, but there was funny stuff in it.
Oh, without a doubt. They wanted to be a Hard Day's Night. That's basically all it was.
Right.
Well, and if you're going to aspire to something.
One of the topics you didn't write about, obviously, and I guess that would be another book, is music on television in terms of like the Midnight Special, Don Kirshner's rock concert, Sessions, which was a groundbreaking show, if you remember that, and Sunday Night with, what was it, David Sanborn, and I think
David
Jules
Sanborn.
Holland.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And interesting, and again, maybe this is a topic for another time. I did a class down at the University of Southern California, where I teach one day a week. I did a class on that topic. 2 days a week, I would chronicle the history, not of television scoring, but of music on television. And so I started with like Amal and the Night Visitors in 1951, and I would play the original, opera, the Christmas opera that was such a big hit. And then I would move into Leonard Bernstein's Young People's Concerts and Dick Clark on American Bandstand. And I did a whole class on the Monkees and the Partridge Family and fake bands on TV.
Right.
It was one of the most fun things I ever did. It was a great excuse to use all these clips from my vast video collection, and was enormous fun to do. And I don't do it anymore because attendance was dwindling. And you know why?
Why?
Because kids don't watch television anymore.
No.
Yeah. No, they don't. And so, what are you going to do? I'd still love to do that class. Maybe that's more for our generation.
It is. I'm a big fan of Later with Jules Holland, which has been running in the UK. Matter of fact, we've had Dave Swift on the show a few times. Dave Swift, the bass player, most recognized bass player in the UK next to Paul McCartney. Why? Because he's been standing behind Jules Holland for 30 some odd years. And I'm curious to know why you think, why a show like that wouldn't be popular in the United States instead of these, these karaoke shows like The Voice, where you go on TV and you could be an unsigned band, you could be Paul McCartney, you could be somebody putting your first record out, and Jules puts you out on stage and you sing a couple of songs. And why did that not catch on in the United States, something like that, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think back to the days of Shindig and Hullabaloo.
Yeah, sure.
And the Shindig was much more pure rock and roll, of course, than Hullabaloo, which was a little homogenized in the 1960s. But I think, to be honest, I think it could work. I think with the right producer in charge, you really could make a success of something like that. I mean, I know what you mean by, karaoke shows, like The Voice and American Idol and that sort of thing. I'm kind of tired of that genre, frankly, and wish they would sort of move on. But I think network television is in a very nervous place right now because, so many people have shifted to streaming. And I think that, the network television business, while still successful, maybe isn't thriving as it once was. And I think it may be in a transitional period.
Well, again, I think because what is television now? What is television? YouTube, to me, like I said, I enjoy watching programs on YouTube, and they're programs that would never get green lighted by a network because they're too niche.
Yeah. I'm about to start the liner notes for an album of television music from fairly obscure but well-scored movies. And guess what? They're all on YouTube.
Yeah.
And so I can find what I need right there. And I don't have to go, traipsing around the internet looking for bootlegs this and that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. One more thought. So many of my friends who have children, I don't have children, but they grew up Disney themes. You know, what was it? Anastasia
Hannah
and
Montana.
right, and the Little
and
Mermaid.
Of course, Nickelodeon was really big back then.
And
My
how
daughter's
many of
20
them?
now.
One of my last assignments in television was to cover Broadway Con. And when Lin Miranda came on stage, it was like the Beatles coming to Kennedy Airport.
Oh, yeah.
And so much of the young people are so much into musical theater. Something our generation, anybody grew up in the 60s and 70s. No, we didn't, that wasn't our type of music, but it's such a popular genre. And it's all because mom and dad, my friends, brought home this thing, the DVD, this new invention called the DVD. And it's film, but it's television because you're watching it on a television. So it's really not film, but then it's more than a regular television. It's a home theater. And we see movie theaters are obsolete now.
It's true that an entire generation of kids has grown up watching The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and Pocahontas endlessly on VHS tapes, and then a couple years later on DVDs. And so the movie experience that we might have had, they're now enjoying in front of a much smaller screen, but at home. And so, yes, I think, and so things like High School Musical, which I remember thinking was just kind of a piece of junk, when it ran on the Disney Channel, has turned out to be an entire franchise and is introducing kids to a kind of musical theater concept.
Yeah. Do you think also that affects how people view television? Is if somebody was if the Stones were on the Ed Sullivan Show, you had to watch the Ed Sullivan Show, and you had to be there at 8:00 on a Sunday night. And maybe if you're lucky, you'd see it again as a rerun, and that's it. It disappeared into the ether. That wasn't.
Yeah, I hate to use the word, but people are kind of spoiled now because this stuff is out there and it can be seen over and over again.
Right.
There was a period. One of the reasons that I wrote the book was because I was so obsessed with TV as a kid that I started taping TV themes off the air in 1966.
With your reel-to-reel, yes?
There are people that you can talk to about that, John. There really are.
We don't know them, but I'm sure there are people that you could talk.
And then I shifted to cassettes in around 1970, and I remember taping Ennio Morricone's theme for The Men from Shiloh in the fall of 1970.
Wow.
Because I thought, holy cow, they replaced the Virginian theme, which I had loved, with this spaghetti westerns guy who'd been doing Clint Eastwood westerns in Italy. And it was this atmospheric thing. And I thought, holy cow. So yeah, I'm a bit obsessed from the old.
Slightly. All right. Well, before we let you go, what are you working on next? What's the next John Burlingame tome?
I'm toying with several different ideas. One of which, two or three of which are sort of in the melting pot, trying to figure out right now where I'm going. But I'm toying with the idea of another book on television music, which would be on a specific genre from the 60s. I haven't decided yet. And I'm thinking about another book, which would refer to the 60s and 70s, because it was a period of time in film music when there were a lot of changes being made. Jazz was coming in, rock and roll was coming in. A lot of film music was becoming more diverse than ever. And I'm thinking there may be a book in that topic. So
yeah, interesting. I just saw Apocalypse
John,
Now.
I can guarantee. I had a manager who, whenever we finished the record, would say, "David, what's the single?" And I'd mention it, and they'd go with something else. So I think the one about rock and roll in the 60s and 70s, I would like that book myself, but
you're no Don Kirshen. No, but again, talking about music, and I just, as I was mentioning, I just saw the at the Paris Theater here, the latest version of Apocalypse Now, and how powerful the music is.
Yeah, that's a great example. God, that Doors song over the opening sequence.
Well, it revived their career, because I was in college when that came out, and the Doors, that's what your older brothers and sisters, who the hell wants to hear that? And then they became the biggest band, right? Remember that cover of Rolling Stone, Jim Morrison, he's hot and he's dead. he's at the top of the chart. So,
guys, I could talk to you guys all day. Thank you for taking the time.
All right, we'll have you back on when you do another book, or we need therapy.
I'd have you on anyway. What the hell?
What the hell? And if you're in New York, we'll take you to Arturo's Pizza on Houston Street.
Thank you, guys.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
Wow. Now, not only that was, wow, not only was that our longest episode, it may be the most complete historical document about TV and TV music.
Incredible. Always great to have John on the show. And as soon as he writes another book, and he is working on something else, he is working on another project, so we'll have him back on. Thank you, John Burlingame. My name is Tom Simeoli, and you, sir, are?
I'm David C. Gross, and we will see you next week. Actually, next week, we won't be coming from, but we will be talking to someone from Chicago.
Oh, that's right. We got a Chicago show for you. All right, folks. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Wow. Not only was that our longest episode, it may be the most complete historical document about TV and TV music.
Always great to have John on the show. And as soon as he writes another book, and he is working on something else, he is working on another project, so we'll have him back on. Thank you, John Burlingame. My name is Tom Simeoli, and you, sir, are?
I'm David C. Gross, and we will see you next week. Actually, next week, we won't be coming from, but we will be talking to someone from Chicago.
Chicago, Chicago, that toddling town.
Oh, that's right. We got a Chicago show for you. All right, folks. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See the USA in your Chevrolet. America's asking you to call. Drive your Chevrolet through the USA. America's the greatest land of all. On a highway or a road along a levee, performance is sweeter, nothing can beat her. Life is completer in a Chevy.
Oh, I'm glad I'm not an Oscar Mayer wiener. That is what I never want to be. 'Cause if I were an Oscar Mayer wiener, there would soon be nothing left to me.
Ay, 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 ay. I am the frito bandido. I like Fritos corn chips. I love them, I do. I want Fritos corn chips. I'll get them from you. Ay, 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 ay. Oh, I am the frito bandido. Give me Fritos corn chips and I'll be your friend. The frito bandido, you must not offend.
Snap, what a happy sound. Snap is the happiest sound I've found. You may clap, rap, tap, slap, but snap makes the world go round. Snap, crackle, Rice Krispies. I say it's crackle, the crispy sound. You gotta have crackle or the clock's not wound. Geese cackle, feathers tickle, bells buckle, beats pickle, but crackle makes the world go round. Snap, crackle, Rice Krispies.
Halo means natural beauty. The first time that you use it, you need no special rinsing after you use it. So halo, everybody, halo. Halo shampoo, halo.
Who walks the stair without a care and makes the happiest sound? Bounce up and down just like a clown. Everyone knows it's Linky, the best present yet to give or get, the favorite all over town. The hit of the day when you're ready to play. Everyone knows it's Linky.
Texaco presents Miss Ethel Merman.
Trust is a must at Texaco. Trust is a must, we know.
You want to be able to always rely
On the gasoline, motor oil, and products you buy. In everything that we do at Texaco, we're working to keep your trust.
Mr. Clean gets rid of dirt and grime and grease in just a minute.
Mr. Clean will clean your whole house and everything that's in it.
Floors, doors, walls, halls, white sidewall tires, and old golf balls.
Sink, stoves, bathtubs he'll do. He'll even help clean laundry too.
Mr. Clean gets rid of dirt and grime and grease in just a minute.
Mr. Clean will clean your whole house.
There's a whole new way of living. Pepsi helps supply the drive. It's got a lot to give to those who like to live, 'cause Pepsi helps them come alive. crazy generation coming at ya, going strong.
When you say but, you've said a lot of things nobody else can say. When you say but, you've gone as far as you can go to get the very best.
Winston tastes good like a cigarette should.
You can take Salem out of the country, but
you can't take the country out of Salem.
You've got your own cigarette now, baby. You've come a long, long way.
In the valley of the jolly green giant.
Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. Almond Joy's got nuts, Mounds don't. Almond Joy's got real milk chocolate, coconut and munchy nuts too. Mounds got deep dark chocolate and chewy coconut. Ooh. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. Peter Paul, Almond Joy's got nuts, Peter Paul, Mounds don't. Because sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't.
Call Roto-Rooter, that's the name. And away goes trouble down the street. Roto-Rooter.
It's a real thing. Coke is, that's the way it should be. Coca-Cola, what the world wants to see. Oh yeah, it's a real thing. Coca-Cola, that's the way it is. Fill a bottle of Coke, and the way it will stay. For the taste of your life, what the world wants today.
people who like their leisure with Pepsi, the drink that's young. So go ahead and pick the drink that lets you drink young as you think. Yet get the right one, the modern light one. Now it's Pepsi for those who think young.
An original taste is what we need. Ask any pepper and he'll say,
Only Dr. Pepper tastes that way.
there's carrying peppers, Marion peppers, diet peppers, quiet peppers. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? There's saluting peppers, tooting peppers. I'm a pepper man. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Being a pepper, drink Dr. Pepper.
Double your pleasure, double your fun with double good double-mint gum.
Wouldn't you really rather have a Buick than any other car this year?
Plop, plop, fizz, fizz, oh, what a relief it is.
I am stuck on Band-Aid, 'cause Band-Aid stuck on me.